Take a good look at this image. This was once a column of Russian tanks, but now it's an open-air cemetery. Carcass after carcass lined up on a dirt road in eastern Ukraine, still smoking. And there's something in this story that almost everyone missed. After losing so much hardware like that, Russia stopped. They went 6 whole months without launching a single armored assault. The obvious explanation would be to say they ran out of tanks, but that wasn't the case. What held back the largest army in Europe for half a year was something else. Something Ukraine did quietly, in the dark, and didn't tell anyone about. Let me show you what's happening. Between May and October of 2025, something strange happened on the front lines. Russia, which had spent the entire war sending waves of armored vehicles against the Ukrainian lines, simply stopped doing that. Instead of columns of tanks, tiny groups started to appear. 2 or 3 soldiers crawling through the bushes, trying to sneak in without being seen. And the world looked at this and said, "How clever, what a smart new tactic." But there was nothing clever about it. It was, in fact, what's left for a war machine when someone takes away its most important piece. And for you to understand which piece that is, I need to explain something to you about how Russia wages war, because without that, nothing else makes sense, right? There's a phrase that military analysts use to describe the Russian army. It's an artillery army with lots of tanks. Notice the order. The artillery comes first. And that's not a figure of speech. According to the Royal United Services Institute, one of the most respected defense institutes in the world, artillery is Russia's primary source of lethality. While Western armies use cannons to support the advance of troops, in Russia, it's the opposite. The troops move to position the artillery to devastate the enemy. It's the artillery that opens the way. It's the artillery that softens the defense before any Russian soldier gets close. This comes from way back. From Soviet Doctrine. Since World War II, Russia has used artillery to dismantle entire defenses and often to destroy entire cities. It became their trademark. What you're seeing here is the BM-21 Grad, a multiple rocket launcher. A Soviet system that spits out dozens of rockets in seconds to saturate an entire area with fire. This rain of fire is the signature of Russian warfare. And you know what else? The Russians have learned how to protect these guns. They stay about 12-15 kilometers behind the line and spend the night even farther back, only moving forward to fire before quickly retreating to avoid retaliation. So, for those who know Russian war doctrine, one thing is quite clear. For them, artillery is not a minor detail. It's the backbone. It's what makes the whole army work. Now imagine what happens if someone rips out that backbone. What Ukraine discovered was a way to reach exactly that place where the Russians thought they were safe. That's exactly what Ukraine did. And the name of the operation is almost a joke. They called it Oxan. That's the name of a well-known supermarket chain in Europe. An internal nickname, kind of a joke about one of the most devastating operations of the war. And the most curious thing is how it started. According to Ukraine's own Minister of Defense, Mikhail Fedorov, it all started by accident. A team was looking for a specific target 25 kilometers away. They didn't find it. So they ended up flying almost 50 kilometers into the occupied territory. And that's when they saw Russians completely relaxed, way too far from the front to imagine anyone would reach them, sitting on their own equipment without a care in the world. And that's where the idea came from. What if we sent a bunch of bomber drones that far in, right where they feel safe, and destroyed everything, all at once? What you're seeing now is that idea, that method put into practice. A heavy bomber drone at night hovering silently over a parked Russian tank, dropping munitions one by one. Each explosion hits the target precisely. Now, imagine what you just saw, but multiplied by hundreds. About 1,000 drones over 3 nights. That's what happened. More than 800 armored vehicles destroyed. In total, 949 targets hit, all more than 50 kilometers from the front line. Everything is coordinated by a system called Delta, which brings together on a single real-time map every drone image and every troop update. 2 of Ukraine's elite units, nicknamed Lazar and Nemesis, were behind this. And in June of 2026, came the second phase called Artachin. The same pun as before, but now with the word art in front, referring to artillery. And they were aiming at artillery again, so what did they do? They went to the regions of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Starobilsk. 231 targets were hit, 171 destroyed. The result? On the first day of the operation, Russian activity dropped by 30 to 80%, depending on the section, but the deadliest blow wasn't to the tanks. It was to a part that Russia simply can't replace. Because there's a technical problem that had been troubling Ukraine for a long time. When you throw a regular grenade on top of a cannon, you damage it, but most of the time the Russians can fix it and get the gun back into action in a short time. The damage is temporary, so Ukrainian engineers spent months working on a solution and created a new type of ammunition made for one thing only: to blow up the artillery barrel from the inside, so that cannon can never be used again. It's not about injuring the cannon, it's about killing it for good. And the words of Fedorov himself, the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, explain this well. He said that in just 2 nights, 250 pieces of Russian artillery were destroyed with this special ammunition. And there is video confirmation of each case. 250 barrels permanently destroyed in 2 nights. Behind much of this drone strategy is Colonel Pavlo Yelizarov and the Lazar Group, responsible for destroying more than $13 billion in Russian equipment throughout the war. And if this story is showing you something you didn't know, let us know and subscribe to the channel now, because we follow every chapter of this war closely and you won't want to miss what's coming next. And what's coming next is exactly what this weapon does to an entire army. Why? Destroying the barrel is just the beginning. Think about it. What's left for Russia after that? Because the entire army was built around artillery. Take away the artillery, and the assault force goes into battle completely exposed. Without that heavy fire softening up the Ukrainian defenses ahead of time, Russian soldiers have to attack much stronger positions, and on top of that, face swarms of drones in their path. The result is brutal. And it's not me saying this. The president of Finland, Alexander Stubb, a source outside the conflict, stated that, or that. The ratio of Russians killed or wounded compared to Ukrainians has risen from 3 to 8 to 8 Russians for every Ukrainian. He estimates about 35,000 Russian casualties per month. And there is data that sums up everything since the beginning of 2026. Ukrainian drone operators have eliminated 12,500 more Russians than Russia managed to recruit in the same period. In other words, the gap just keeps growing. What you're seeing now is a Ukrainian fighter jet dropping precision-guided bombs on assault groups and Russian positions hidden in the woods. This kind of scene repeats itself every day. And notice the perversity of the situation for Moscow. The Russian army keeps receiving orders to attack in the same way as always, day after day. In just a recent 24-hour period, there were more than 250 clashes along the front, the heaviest in the Pokrovsk and Sloviansk sectors. The order to advance hasn't changed. What has changed is that now these men are advancing without covering fire that should be going ahead of them. So that new and clever tactic of groups of 2 soldiers was never really a tactic at all. It was desperation. It was the only way to attack when you don't really have anything left to attack with. But then you might be thinking, okay, but doesn't Russia recover? Can't they just produce more? And here, we need to be honest because there is a real obstacle. The truth is that Russia is trying to catch up. Their plan is to produce more than 7 million drones in 2026. 7 million. That's a lot. And it would be foolish to pretend that this doesn't matter. But there's a problem they still haven't managed to overcome. Ukraine is years ahead. Today, Ukrainian first-person view drones already outnumber the Russian ones by a ratio of 1.5 to 1 on the front line. And this advantage keeps growing. In May alone, Ukraine hit almost 180,000 military targets, most of them with drones. And it doesn't stop at the numbers. Ukraine has already developed medium-range drones that can fly 200 kilometers or more, which means that even pulling the artillery back doesn't solve Russia's problem. Because at that distance, the cannon becomes useless. There are drones with artificial intelligence that identify targets on their own, without relying on satellite signals, which leaves Russian jamming with nothing left to jam. And there's an almost funny detail in the middle of all this. Ukraine trains operators to shoot down Russian bomb drones, the Shahed, using a modified version of the game GTA 5 as a cheap simulator. That's the reality of war nowadays. Operators training inside a video game. Do you know the real-life result of this training? A Ukrainian interceptor drone that costs a fraction of the price, catching up to and blowing up a Russian Shahed in mid-air in the sky over Ukraine.
Oh!
A cheap drone taking down an expensive drone. The obstacle is real and Russia will probably persist, but it's trying to catch up from far behind someone who's already way ahead. So let's go back to the beginning, to that 6-month pause that no one could explain. Now it all makes sense, doesn't it? Russia didn't stop to change tactics. It stopped because Ukraine silently sawed off the leg that holds the Russian army up. Yeah, an entire army built around artillery, suddenly forced to fight without it. And that's the part that gives you chills when you stop to think about it. A war machine can look imposing, be feared, and seem unstoppable, and already be hollow on the inside. The giant keeps walking for a while purely out of inertia without realizing that its leg is already gone. That's what Operation Alcambro revealed. The world's most feared military power depended on just one thing. And when they cut that thing in the dark, the collapse had already begun, even though no one had seen it yet. And this story isn't over yet. In fact, it's far from it. President Volodymyr Zelensky has already approved a new 40-day strategic initiative led by the Security Service of Ukraine to tighten the encirclement around the Russian invaders even further. A possible third phase of the operation may be taking shape now. And, judging by how the first two went, Russia will only find out when it's already happening. That's why it's worth sticking around. This story is still going to escalate, and we're going to cover every step of it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so you don't miss out. And before you leave, answer me one thing in the comments. If Ukraine has already secretly stalled the Russian army once, and is now preparing the next phase, do you think Russia can recover in time? Leave your guess in the comments. I really want to know. Thank you for watching and for the comments you leave. That means a lot to us. See you in the next video.